I recently read the book Never Split the Difference by author Chris Voss. Several years ago, author Chris Voss was invited to a negotiating class at Harvard. The class instructor asked Chris to conduct a mock negotiation with one of the Harvard students. In this mock negotiation, Chris was selling a product, and his counterpart was given a set budget to buy the product. Chris and the Harvard student went back and forth until they arrived at an agreed price. When the instructor walked up to them and asked, "What was the price you agreed upon?" Chris told her, and she immediately burst out laughing. She said, "Chris, you literally got every dime he had." The instructor was used to seeing her students split the difference between the minimum selling price the seller was given and the max budget the buyer was given. But somehow, author Chris Voss had convinced his negotiating counterpart to willingly offer his entire budget. To see if it was a fluke, the instructor had Chris negotiate a different student the following day. And again, Chris walked away with the maximum amount. These Harvard students knew every cutting-edge negotiating technique in the book. So how did Chris Voss convince them to give him their entire budget? Well, Chris wasn't just some guy off the street. Chris was the lead hostage negotiator for the FBI. And after dozens of high-stakes negotiations with kidnappers around the world, Chris Voss found that the key to getting what he wanted and avoiding compromises and making the other side feel like they were treated fairly was tactical empathy. Tactical empathy is the act of sincerely empathizing with your counterpart's situation and then getting them to empathize with your situation. Let me tell you why demonstrating sincere empathy is critical to negotiation and how giving and receiving empathy is the key to walking away from a negotiation with the best possible price, best possible salary, or the best possible contract while making the other party feel like they were treated fairly. During a psychotherapy session, a psychiatrist will encourage a patient to talk while she listens intensely. Occasionally, the psychiatrist will jump in to help clarify what the patient is saying and feeling. Psychiatrists do this because they know that their patient will be less defensive and less opposed to change if they can make them feel heard. The same principle applies to a negotiation. During a negotiation, your counterpart will be uncomfortable dealing with you and resist your counteroffers until you demonstrate that you understand their world and can empathize with their cares and concerns. A woman in Chris Voss's negotiating workshop learned this the hard way. The woman, who we'll call Susan, was a sales rep for a pharmaceutical company. She was attempting to influence a doctor to replace one of the drugs that he was prescribing to his patients with a drug that she was selling. In the first meeting with the doctor, he was cold and skeptical. He told her that nothing would convince him to replace the drug he was already administering his patients. Although this initial sales pitch was going terrible, Susan started to see how deeply he cared for his patients. When he talked about any one of his patients, his body language and tone of voice was noticeably warmer. Susan pointed it out. "You seem very passionate about treating your patients. I can see how hard you work to tailor specific treatments to each and every patient." The doctor paused and looked at her as if he was seeing her for the first time and said, "That's right. I feel like I'm treating an epidemic that the other doctors are not picking up on, which means that a lot of patients are not getting treated adequately." From that moment on, the doctor let down his guard and was willing to listen to what Susan had to say. When Susan brought up the positive attributes of her product, he listened closely. By the end of the meeting, the doctor said he was open to trying the new medication, and he placed an order that day. The magical words that turned around Susan's conversation with the doctor were, "That's right." If you can get your counterpart to say the words, "That's right," then you know you've made them feel heard, and you'll know that they'll be more receptive to any offers and counteroffers that you make from that point forward. Author Chris Voss says, "A negotiation doesn't truly start until you hear the words, 'That's right.'" The best way to get your counterpart to say the words, "That's right," is to listen to the emotion behind your counterpart's words. Your goal is to spot some cares and concerns that they have regarding the negotiation, and then summarize those cares and concerns with a concise statement that starts with, "It seems like," or "It sounds like." As in, "It seems like you're really concerned about blank," or "It sounds like blank is really important to you." The beauty of starting your statements with "It seems like," or "It sounds like" is that if you're wrong, you don't damage the conversation, since you can follow up with, "Well, I didn't say that's how it was, it just seems that way." But if your counterpart confirms your summary statement with a "That's right," then it's time to get them to empathize with your situation. Chris Voss says the best way to get someone to empathize with your situation and start thinking of ways in which they can help you is to ask calibrated questions. Calibrated questions are open-ended questions that start with how or what and are calibrated to direct your counterpart's focus towards your problem. They turn a negotiation from a confrontation to a problem-solving session. Chris Voss says, the ultimate calibrated question is, how am I supposed to do that? Let's say you're renting an apartment and your landlord tells you that he's going to increase the rent from $1,200 a month to $1,500 a month. The best way to avoid the rent increase and negotiate a lower rent is to empathize with his position and then ask a version of, how am I supposed to do that? You could say, it seems like you think your apartment is undervalued and you just want a fair market price. But how am I supposed to pay $1,500 a month when I only make enough money to afford $1,200 a month? The key is to say, how am I supposed to do that? In the same way you would say, I value your intelligence. Can you please help me solve my problem? At this stage, if you've made your counterpart feel heard, you've built rapport with them. And when you ask your counterpart the calibrated question, how am I supposed to do that? Your counterpart will most likely do one of two things. They'll either come up with a creative solution so that both of you can get what you value most, or they'll raise or lower their initial demand to accommodate you. If they take option 2, but still give you an offer that doesn't meet your needs, you simply respond with a slightly different calibrated question. Back to the rental example, if your landlord reduces his rent to $1,400 a month, you could respond with, that's very generous of you. That's probably the lowest price you can go, but I'm sorry. I just don't see how I'm supposed to pay $1,400 a month to stay here when I can rent a similar apartment nearby for less than $1,200 a month. This technique of politely countering every offer with some version of, how am I supposed to do that, is precisely how Chris Voss got those Harvard students to willingly offer him their entire budget. So the next time you go into a negotiation, empathize with their situation and try to get a that's right. Then get them to empathize with your situation and ask them to help solve one of your problems by asking a calibrated question like, how am I supposed to do that? If you do this, you're on your way to mastering the art of negotiation, which is simply the art of getting someone else to have your way. That was the core message that I gathered from Never Split the Difference. It's a great book on understanding the subtleties of a negotiation. I highly recommend it. If you would like a one-page PDF summary of insights that I gathered from this book, just click the link below and I'd be happy to email it to you. If you already subscribe to the free Productivity Game email newsletter, this PDF is sitting in your inbox. If you like this video, please share it. And as always, thanks for watching and have yourself a productive week.